You're watching the Bruges Group series, Eminent Thatcherites. This is the episode detailing the life and political contributions of Ian Gow. We hope you enjoy.
He was Margaret Thatcher's PPS in the early years and remained her most devoted supporter. He was also a man of strict principles, who believed in defending the integrity of the union between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. And, like his friend and colleague Erin, he was murdered by terrorists in a car bomb attack. He was Ian Gow, MP for Eastbourne. Speak to any of the people who knew Ian Gow, and the one thing they will tell you about him was his deep sense of loyalty. He was one of the most sociable of members of Parliament and was brilliant at manipulating members of the House of Commons in the tea room. But it was all to a purpose, and that purpose was the reassertion of conservative values in politics. Ian Gow was born on the 11th of February 1930 in Upper Harley Street in London. His father was a doctor attached to St Bartholomew's Hospital. Gow was educated at Winchester, but he chose not to go to university and decided upon an army career. Ian was commissioned as an officer in the 15th to 19th Hussars and went to serve in Germany, the Malay States Emergency, and significantly Northern Ireland. The period that he spent in Ulster was around the time of the border campaign being run by the IRA, and that had a profound impact upon him. He formed a bond of deep affection with the people and the topography of the province that never left him. To paraphrase Mendelssohn, Northern Ireland became the country of his predilection. Gow would end his military career with a long period in the Territorial Army and eventually reached the rank of Major. Politics were never far away from Ian Gow's thoughts. One of the very early close personal friendships that he had was with the future Chancellor of the Exchequer, Geoffrey Howe. They'd known each other since their youths, and Gow remained in contact with Howe throughout the period of his formation of the Bow Group. Following the army, Gow went on to qualify as a solicitor, and he eventually reached the position of a partner in a highly respected law firm in London. Like many of his contemporaries, Ian Gow took 3 attempts to actually get into Parliament. He first stood in the 1964 general election in Coventry East, and then in the 1966 general election in the London constituency of Clapham. Ian could tell some wonderful anecdotes about this time when he was representing Eastbourne, a small Sussex town reputed for its retirement homes and the elderly population, including the fact that one Dr. Bodkin Adams, notorious for standing trial at the Old Bailey in the 1950s, charged with poisoning elderly female patients, used to insist at election times on making donations to his constituency Conservative Association. Gow was convinced that Heath had to go as leader of the Conservative Party. He voted for Margaret Thatcher on the first ballot in 1975, but faced a dilemma on the second. His lifelong friend Geoffrey Howe had entered politics. Like many of his contemporaries, Ian Gow took 3 attempts to actually get into Parliament. He first stood in the 1964 general election in Coventry East, and then in the 1966 general election in the London constituency of Clapham. Finally, amidst the collapse of the Heath government, he entered Parliament as the member for Eastbourne in February 1974. He could tell some wonderful anecdotes about his time representing that constituency. It's a small Sussex town reputed for its retirement homes and elderly population. One of the facts he used to often speak about was Dr. John Bodkin Adams, notorious for standing trial at the Old Bailey in the 1950s and charged with poisoning elderly female patients, used to insist at election time on making donations to his constituency Conservative Association. Gow was convinced in 1975, a year after entering Parliament, that Heath had to go as leader of the Conservative Party. He voted for Margaret Thatcher on the first ballot, but he faced a dilemma on the second. His lifelong friend Geoffrey Howe had entered the race. Once again, Gow's instinct of loyalty kicked in, and he voted for Howe over Thatcher. Now, that vote in 1975 would be the very last time for the next decade that he would be separated politically from the lady. In 1978, Ian was promoted to the front bench opposition team, joining the Shadow Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, Erin. Gow and Neve were to develop a close relationship in that year. They both worked together, and both favoured an integrationist approach to the constitution of Northern Ireland. They worked together on Conservative policy, and Neve introduced Ian into Margaret Thatcher's leadership circle. The period immediately after the 1979 general election was arguably Ian Gow's zenith in government. He was appointed by Margaret Thatcher as a parliamentary private secretary and became one of her very closest confidants. She had other PPSs later, but none formed the strong working relationship that she had with Ian Gow. The period immediately after the 1979 general election was arguably Ian Gow's zenith in government. He was appointed by Margaret Thatcher as a parliamentary private secretary and became one of her closest confidants. She had other PPSs later on, but none formed the strong working relationship with her that Gow did. Ian Gow was seen behind the Prime Minister almost every night on the television, and each morning in the newspapers. As a schoolboy, I initially wondered who this person was. Something should be said about Ian Gow's personality and appearance at this stage. For a start, Ian came across as an archetypal old-fashioned solicitor, wearing a three-piece suit with horn-rimmed glasses. His personality is harder to describe. There was something wonderfully pre-war about the Gow's personality and appearance at this stage. For a start, Ian came across as an archetypal old-fashioned solicitor, wearing a three-piece suit with horn-rimmed glasses. His personality is harder to describe. There was something wonderfully pre-war about the turn of his phrases. I heard him often refer to a parliamentary seat as a division, for example. Something should be said about Ian Gow's personality and appearance at this stage. For a start, Ian came across as the archetypal old-fashioned solicitor, usually wearing a three-piece suit and horn-rimmed glasses. His personality is actually harder to describe. There was something wonderfully pre-war about the turn of his phrases. I heard him once refer to parliamentary seat as a division, as opposed to the more commonly used modern term of constituency. He often used to refer to radios as wirelesses. He spoke precisely, and he was a great fan of Winston Churchill. But for all of that, he was extremely witty, funny, and warm. His favourite cocktail, which he used to mix in his office in the House of Commons, was a White Lady, and he continued smoking in the face of increasing political disapproval. But fundamentally, he was always kind, and I once saw this in his own company in Northern Ireland when an unemployed man approached him just in the street. He was good at giving advice, as Margaret Thatcher knew. Ian was known as Supergrass in the House of Commons tea rooms, as he always acted as Margaret Thatcher's eyes and ears in smelling out potential dissent, like an early warning system. Problems, therefore, could be headed off before they grew out of control, and Ian was vital in this role. After the 1983 landslide re-election of Margaret Thatcher, she felt it was time that he was elevated to ministerial rank. She told him that she didn't want to hold back his natural progress in career terms. So he became Minister of Housing and later Minister of State of the Treasury. Gow was a diligent minister, but failed really to make his mark in either of these roles. Frankly, this probably wasn't his forte. In November 1985, the Anglo-Irish Agreement was signed, giving a say to the Irish Republic in the running of the affairs of Northern Ireland. Gow resigned, the only minister to do so, and formed the Friends of the Union. The Anglo-Irish Agreement was signed, giving a say to the Irish Republic in the running of the affairs of Northern Ireland. Gow resigned as a minister, the only one to do so, and formed the campaign, the Friends of the Union. He campaigned throughout the United Kingdom on this issue and drew packed audiences at the Conservative Party conference. He featured widely on television. Despite his resignation, the link with Margaret Thatcher was preserved. He called her the finest chief, the most resolute leader, the kindest friend that any member of this House could hope to serve. He remained close to her and advised her when she was challenged by Sir Anthony Mayer in November 1989 for the leadership. And then on the 30th of July 1990, a bomb exploded under his car, parked on the driveway of Ian's house as he attempted to use it. The IRA claimed responsibility for the murder, but no individual was ever charged. Margaret Thatcher called this an irreplaceable loss. The Eastbourne by-election that followed resulted in a Liberal Democrat victory, and with it, increased calls for Margaret Thatcher to stand down as Prime Minister. Geoffrey Howe resigned as her deputy and turned on her in the House of Commons. Could Ian have brought them together? We'll never know. And finally, when her leadership was challenged by Michael Hasseltine, her early warning system and chief canvasser was just no longer present to help. Why is Ian Gow important to us now? I would say for his integrity, principle, loyalty to friends, and loyalty to country.
You've been listening to the Bruges Group series, Eminent Thatcherites. Join us again next time for our third installment, when we'll talk about Keith Joseph, another eminent Thatcherite. Until then, keep the fires of liberty burning strong. Remember that no Dunkirk can deter a Thatcherite, and the British never surrender. Until next time, I'm John Griffin for Bruges Group.